welcome to Verbal to Visual Video. I'm your host, Doug Neill. What we do in this video series is we talk about how to take verbal ideas and make those ideas visual, using this skill called visual note-taking. In many cases, you'll want to use this skill to capture ideas from others, ideas in classes that you're taking or in the books that you're reading or the conferences that you're going to. But in other cases, you might want to use this skill to process your own ideas. And that's what this episode is about. Specifically, it's about using the skill of visual note-taking to conduct an annual review, which is a process of looking back at how things went last year, what went well, what didn't, and looking toward next year as well, and making some plans for how you would like that year to go. So what you end up with at the end of this annual review process are some resolutions for the next year. But rather than falling into the most common experience of forgetting about those resolutions after a few weeks or a month, by giving your ideas a visual form, you have a way to carry those ideas with you throughout this entire next year. And ultimately, what this annual review process is about is living life with intention. It's about looking back at how you lived your life in this past year and making some decisions about how you'd like to live it in this next year. And that might involve making some changes, depending on the life you would like to lead and the goals you would like to achieve. And in case this idea of an annual review is new to you, I thought I would share with you the process that I have gone through within the past month or so to look back at 2014, look at what went well and what didn't, and look forward to 2015 and let you guys know how I am approaching this next year. In part one of this two-part series, I'm going to focus on the looking back part and chat about how 2014 went. And in the next video, in part two, I'll share with you my plans for 2015. But I would also like you guys to take part in this process if you're interested in. So at the end of this video, I'll be sharing some tools and resources that will help you both conduct an annual review and also kind of give it a visual form. So look for that at the end of this video. For me, this is only the second year that I have conducted one of these annual reviews. I did it for the first time last year, and one of the things that you can do with this annual review process is, in addition to looking at what went well and what didn't for the past year and where you'd like to go for the next year, it can often be helpful to define for yourself a big picture theme to the year. So when I went through this process last year, I was looking back at 2013. And in retrospect, I decided to call 2013 the year of transition, because it was within that year, in 2013, that I kind of fully moved from a career that was leading toward being a high school teacher to a career more as an entrepreneur. And there are two components to that entrepreneurship. One is freelance work that I've been doing, sketching out ideas. So taking articles that someone else has written or a talk that someone gave and putting together a visual summary, either as a static image or as a video, kind of like this one. The second component of that entrepreneurship piece has been building instructional materials like this, building websites and products and things that hopefully are helping you, the viewer of this video, develop your skills as a visual note taker. So there's still kind of a teacher component to a lot of the work that I am doing, but it's not within a structured system. I have the freedom to create this learning environment online in whatever way feels best, which is both really exciting but also kind of daunting. So having made that transition in 2013, what I realized I needed to focus on in 2014 was developing the skills and the habits that it takes to succeed in a work environment that I essentially create for myself. I don't have an office or a classroom to go to. I don't have a curriculum to follow or coworkers to support the things that I'm making, which again has its positives and negatives. I have a lot of freedom to create the things that I think will be most useful to people. But I lack that support that comes from an outside structure. So essentially, I have to create that structure for myself. So with that in mind, I decided to declare in advance 2014 as the year of conquering resistance. I use that word resistance in the way that Stephen Pressfield defines it in his book, The War of Art, which is a great book, which describes resistance as really any of the internal forces that keep you from doing work and putting it out into the world. After making that transition to entrepreneurship in 2013, I quickly realized how easy it is for resistance to make its way into your life on a day-to-day basis. Having your entire day to yourself is very liberating, and so long as you're motivated, it's relatively easy to make good use of your time. The problem is that inevitably that motivation will fade. And that's when things get a little tricky, because if you have a job that you go to and an external structure surrounding that job, even if you're not particularly motivated, you still show up because you know if you don't, you're going to get fired. There are people counting on you to be there and for you to do your work. As someone working independently from home, that external structure and those people aren't there, which means that once motivation fades, then things like self-doubt and procrastination creep into your life. And unless you have a system for dealing with those things can lead to you not making the most of your days and your weeks. And that's ultimately what leads to failure as an entrepreneur. So by declaring 2014 the year of conquering resistance, there were two things I was focused on doing, was developing those habits and routines to ensure that I was making things on a regular basis and shipping those things on a regular basis. And that can apply both to the freelance work that I'm doing in collaboration with others and also my own individual projects. And some additional context that's important to understand my story of 2014 is that I moved back in with my parents, as I think so many of us are doing in our mid to late 20s. I moved from Portland, Oregon, back to Pleasant Hill, Oregon, which is a couple hours south, just outside of Eugene, which is where I grew up. And I made that move in order to remove some of the financial stress from my life as I tried to build up the work that I was doing, both as a freelancer and then this work around developing educational materials for those learning this skill of visual note taking. So I set up shop within my bedroom in my parents' house and got to work. I spent the first few months of 2014 very much focused on routines, daily routines, weekly routines that I knew I would need to have in place in order to get the work done that I needed and wanted to get done. I did a lot of experimenting around like what time in the morning to get up, what I did first thing in the morning, how I broke up the work that I was doing in the morning versus the afternoon versus the evening, when to take breaks and do things like meditate and exercise on a regular basis. So I spent those first 3 months trying to set up the structure around my days, a structure that was best suited to making and shipping things and not letting resistance get the best of me. After I had some routines in place that felt right to me, I spent the next few months focusing on deadlines. So while the first few months I focused on how I spent my hours each day. Those next 3 months added the facilitative anxiety component of trying to stick to a particular publishing schedule. I wanted to get to the point where I was making and sharing things on a consistent, predictable basis. I knew I needed deadlines in order to get that shipping part down in particular. It can be easy to chug along on the making of a thing and then keep working on it and keep working on it and keep working on it and trying to get to this point where it's this perfect thing that you then share with the world. But what's more important than making it perfect is being done and getting it out into the world. So that's what I tried to focus on during the second 3 months, is putting deadlines in place to make sure that I wasn't spending too much time making before sharing. So that covers the first half of 2014. The second half of 2014 was essentially a process of refinement, where I was making small tweaks to my daily routines and publishing schedules and a fine-tuning of the things that I'd been working on the first half of the year. As I developed those systems and routines and habits, I got a lot of work done in 2014. I did a lot of freelance work and developed better systems for taking someone else's ideas and giving them a visual form that was shareable in a variety of formats. And I also built a lot here around verbal to visual. This site did not exist until May of 2014. I built this site as a place to help others develop the skill of visual note-taking, and did some experimentation early on with what form would best facilitate that goal. And in the first few months, focused on a written blog and an audio podcast before coming to this idea of doing a video series, which seems to be the best fit to talk about how to take verbal ideas and make them visual. And along the way, I created a couple of resources. I made the Verbal to Visual Notebook, which is a fully sketched workbook, a set of activities to help you build your visual note-taking skills. And I also put together a visual vocabulary pack, which is a set of hand-sketched icons that you can either throw into your documents or presentations or use to learn yourself and to start developing your own visual vocabulary. So it's exciting to look back at 2014 and see that I have made some things, and to see that the effort that I've put into this project has not been in vain, as I've gotten good feedback about the site in general and those resources that I've been putting out. So those 3 things in particular constitute what went well for me in 2014. In thinking about what didn't go so well, I like to use this idea from Jonathan Fields that kind of breaks down your life into 3 buckets into which you put your time and your energy. There's a contribution bucket, a connection bucket, and a vitality bucket. The contribution bucket has to do with the work that you do and what you contribute to the world. The connection bucket has to do with your personal connection to others. And the vitality bucket is more about your personal health, how well you're taking care of your body. And the idea that Jonathan Fields puts forth is that each of these can only get as full as the least filled bucket. So if you're neglecting one of these areas, that's going to bring down what you get out of the buckets that you are actively putting energy into. And as I look back at 2014 and the work that I've done living in my parents' house in a relatively rural and an isolated area, I feel like I've done a pretty good job of filling the contribution bucket and the vitality bucket. I've gotten quite a bit of work done this year, and I've taken pretty good care of my body. But I have neglected that connection bucket. I did not spend enough time in 2014 connecting with others in person. I've had some wonderful connections online, which is great and one of the beautiful things about the internet, but that needs to be balanced with time spent with people in person. So as I look to 2015, I know that that's going to be an area of focus for me, is contributing to that bucket on a much more regular basis. And in order to do that, there's some simplifying that I'm going to have to do in other areas of my life, particularly the work side, in order to make space and put time aside for that connection bucket. So I've decided to name 2015 the year of simplicity, with 3 sub-themes of focus, mindfulness, and minimalism. And in the next video, I will be talking more specifically about what that means and how I'll be setting up some ways to measure that concretely, to make sure that it isn't one of those resolutions that goes by the wayside. But in between this video and the next, I'd like to turn the attention your way and ask, what will 2015 look like for you? If you'd like to go through this process of conducting an annual review and maybe even giving it some sort of visual form, I've put together a couple of templates for you to use in that process. And I encourage you to work through those and complete your own visual annual review. And the primary purpose for doing that, of course, is for you to have that to help guide your efforts in 2015. But if you'd like to share what you come up with, your plans for 2015 and what you discovered as you looked back on 2014, then I encourage you to send me your sketch, and I'll include it in the post for the next video. In that next video, I'll be looking in detail at my plans for 2015. And it would be really fun to also share some of your ideas, what you are going to be focusing on in this next year. I think it would be useful for everyone to see not just what I'm doing, but what others are doing and how they are expressing their plans for this next year in a visual format. So if you're comfortable sharing, I'd love to see it, and I'd love to be able to add your images to the post for next week. And there are a number of ways that you can share your sketch with me. You can email me, doug@verbaltovisual.com. Or if you have a blog yourself or a place where you can post your own sketches online, then post them there and send me a tweet with a link to that post, or add a comment here letting me know where you have shared that so that I can follow up and plug that into the post for next week. And even if you've already made a New Year's resolution, even if you already know what you want to focus on for 2015, here's an opportunity to give that idea of yours a visual form so that you can stick it up on your wall, have it as a reminder, and even just to make sure it's locked more deeply into your brain so that you can achieve your goals for this next year. I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with, and I will talk to you guys next week. Till then.